Well, Mr. Boye Leyimu is a legal practitioner. He joins us now to give his perspective as well on the amendments going on with the 1999 Constitution. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you very much. Good morning, viewers.
But as it is now, they've talked about that part where they separate the office of the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice. I mean, lawyers have argued separately in different directions on this same matter. What do you think about that clause?
Well, the good thing about it is that the Attorney Generals will now begin to exercise their functions as Attorney Generals in the true sense of what that office entails. What you've heard up till now is that most occupants of that office have had difficulty balancing the office or the functions of Attorney General, which is as a lawyer, strictly speaking, with the Minister of Justice, or rather the office of Justice, which is that of a politician. So it requires a very delicate balancing. But you know, unfortunately, most occupants of that position in our most recent history have tended to behave more like politicians rather than the lawyers they ought to be. So with this separation, I think we will probably have more of honest advice being given by the occupants of the office of the Attorney General. If you look at the history of Nigeria, especially since independence, you will observe that especially at the federal level, few occupants have actually behaved more like attorneys and mostly like the politicians. Because you see, when you put both offices together and you have to function in two offices as it were, and you are not an independent-minded person, and you don't have the respect and gain the confidence of the people you are supposed to be advising, political considerations tend to override considerations of giving legal advice. Because
they are both expected to act as politicians and as professionals.
And as professionals. So regularly, if I constantly, there's always that conflict. And for convenience sake, for expediency, ethical considerations are usually pushed aside.
So you don't think there will be a clash between those offices when they eventually get to
Well, naturally, in every cabinet, you are bound to have competition. You're bound to have people trying to gain influence and so on and so forth. And after a while, both of them will settle in and understand their proper roles.
Can you really be, independent, so to speak? Because that whole idea of having a separate office for the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of the Federation, knowing full well that the appointments still, in a way, sort of, will come from the same arm of government, the executive.
The overriding consideration is that if you are acting, strictly speaking, as a professional, you will give advice, all right? Now, it's not for you to compel the people you are giving the advice to take your advice, but you will have satisfied your conscience and you will feel fulfilled that you have delivered this advice without, well, really, it depends on what you're giving advice on. There are other extraneous considerations, but that will not, strictly speaking, weigh too heavily on your mind when you are offering advice. Then you leave it to the occupant of the other office to push it the way politicians normally push their agenda.
Let's get to the local governments. They also propose that the local governments be autonomous in their administration and day-to-day function. But this morning, the news emerged that the governors are fighting that autonomy for the local governments. How do you see that playing out?
Well, you see, basically, because I was in local government myself before in Lagos State, Shomolu local government, I was a councillor there when Babangida began his transition program. You know, ideally, there's nothing wrong with local governments enjoying autonomy, especially if the people who run the local governments have commitment, if they have a vision, if they, if they're disciplined people, and and so forth, But unfortunately, that is not the case. I think the governors are fighting it essentially because they know that it will reduce their influence in their states, rebellious local government chairmen and councillors could be a source of instability, really. So one thing,
rebellious.
When I say rebellious, I mean who share contrary vision, contrary opinion and so forth. You see, the way the system is working right now, the governor is like a demigod. Look at what is playing out or trying to play out in Ekiti. That's because the House of Assembly is largely APC, and the new governor is PDP. Now, all the local government chairmen are also APC local government chairmen. So, you see, I think that's really, once they get that kind of achieve autonomy, then you're likely to have a situation where the local government chairman will be more assertive, the local governments will be more assertive, and therefore the governors are likely to have a hard time controlling them.
Yeah, but okay. So, I think what comes to mind now is the effectiveness which the country can actually put this to use. If we can pass this before 2015 elections, we're trying to see what may come out of it. Now, if you're talking about local government and the section where independent candidacy is, and we have some couple of individuals who come up for elections, especially at the grassroots level, in the 2015 elections and subsequent elections, how will that pan out in the whole scheme of things when people talk about godfatherism and those people who will be so afraid of someone breathing down their neck when they're supposed to do their jobs on that administration?
If you permit me to share my own experience with you in the local government.
While you were there as a councillor?
Yes, we were elected actually as independent candidates. It was not a political party, and really that was the major attraction for me at that time. Now, but in reality, I discovered that tendencies, people were already warming up against the forming of political parties. So tendencies sponsored many of the candidates. And then we landed at the council and discovered that there were actually two tendencies, two factions, the chairman's faction and the other tendency, the other faction.
So in other words, indirectly, a party was...
yes. And here was I, inexperienced, much younger, thinking that we were all independent candidates. I soon realized that if I was going to get anything for my constituency, I have to admit the reality of what was on the ground.
What was the reality? Being the dependent candidate?
Well, no, the reality was that there were two tendencies. That was what I discovered.
Also known as a party, in a way.
Well, yes, in a sense. That's why I use the word tendency, actually, rather than faction. So once I discovered that, and that I needed people if I was going to secure any meaningful amenities for my constituency. So I needed to align with the tendency that was likely to be a vehicle to my achieving my objectives. And so you're likely to have, whether you like it or not, such a thing playing out. It's even whatever name you call it, independent candidacy.
How was funding like then? Because now we're looking at this vis-a-vis what would come out of this when it's passed, that now funding will go directly to the local government instead of what we'll talk about joint account?
I think that would be a good thing. A good thing in the sense that really most of the funds that come in for the local governments now, if the governors are not tampering with it, the party is tampering with it, and a bulk of the funds go to personnel maintenance. And you really find that it's only in few local governments in this country today that you actually have infrastructural development as such. I can't remember the last time roads were tarred or, on a massive scale, and maintenance is poor because these local governments don't have control over their own funds. When I say, again, let me share my experience. When I served in the local government at the time, the funding came directly from the federal government to the local governments. The states had, it was a military administration, and they had virtually, no control as such.